tennis champ Novak Djokovic and his vaccination status, waiting for answers that could come just hours from now on whether the Australian government will allow him to stay and defend his title in the Australian Open. ABC's Britt Clennett joins us from Hong Kong with the latest. Britt, good morning.
Good morning, Whit. That's right. Djokovic will soon learn whether he can stay in Australia, but there are now questions over the timeline of his COVID infection. This morning, as tennis superstar Novak Djokovic is hours away from fighting his visa cancellation, anti-vaccine protesters and Djokovic supporters gathering outside the Australian Prime Minister's home in Sydney, cheering for the athlete's release. Others throughout the country feel differently.
I think if it's our rule, it's our rule. That's it. No jab, no play. You have to tell the kids like that. You can't tell the adult different rules. Yeah, that's it.
Attorneys for Djokovic will argue his visa be reinstated after the Australian government denied him entry days after receiving a COVID medical exemption to compete in the Australian Open.
They will attempt to argue their case, and in this fraught political environment, the government of the day has got to stand up and be accountable. The opposition will try to attack them. So it doesn't play well for Mr. Djokovic outside of the court, but in the court, it's likely that that justice will prevail in the court.
The Grand Slam champion confined to an immigration detention hotel normally reserved for asylum seekers until his court hearing later today. This as court documents indicate Djokovic's COVID-19 test results came back positive the same day he appeared in public, maskless, as evidenced by these tweeted photos. It is unclear whether the tennis player knew of his COVID status at the time. Serbia's Prime Minister voicing full support of Djokovic and says they managed to get him gluten-free meals and equipment.
Uradimo sve što možemo da ga puste u Australiju.
If he wins the appeal, Djokovic will be able to play in the Grand Slam tournament, facing alongside other tennis greats, many of whom have spoken out against the Serbian player.
I think if it was me that wasn't vaccinated, I wouldn't be getting an exemption.
Djokovic could miss more Australian Opens. If he loses this fight to stay, he could be banned from entering the country for the next 3 years. James?
Thanks, Britt. Yeah, this is just such an extraordinary story. Let's get into it now with tennis analyst Patrick McEnroe from ESPN. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you. Good morning.
The ruling on whether Novak Djokovic can be allowed into Australia, it's expected sometime today before evening here. How do you think that's going to go?
Well, actually, having gone through the documents myself and what his lawyers have put together, I think he's actually got an excellent chance to win the appeal because he did exactly what was asked of him as far as getting the visa, applying for the exemption. He followed all the rules that were put in front of him. Now, it seems that the rules changed somewhat as he was on his way to Australia. Of course, this produced a political firestorm from the public in Australia, and then the federal government got involved. And they do have the ability, the federal government, once you get to the border in Australia and they analyze your visa, they can overturn it. But it sounds to me like maybe they went a bridge too far because Djokovic certainly followed all the rules that he was supposed to have followed. And it does state pretty clearly that you can get into the country unvaccinated. That, of course, is the big question. Are you allowed in, if you're vaccinated or not, into Australia? But it seems pretty clear to me in reading his legal arguments that he certainly believed that he would be let into the country unvaccinated because he had tested positive for COVID in the last month.
Now, I understand you've spoken to some of the tennis players who are there getting ready for the Australian Open. Where do their sympathies lie, do you think?
Well, as you heard from one of them right there and others, when this initial news broke, I think most players were rolling their eyes a little bit with, okay, he's Novak Djokovic, he's #1 in the world, he's trying to break the record, he's trying to win his 10th Australian Open. Of course he's going to get a little special treatment. That's not unusual in the tennis world for the top stars. But I think as this is unfolded, and as Djokovic has become clear the way he was treated, not treated that well at the border by the border agents, apparently his phone was taken away, he wasn't allowed to contact his lawyers or Tennis Australia, which runs the event and acts as a go-between between the players and the local government. I think the tide is starting to turn. I think you're seeing players feel, Novak is standing up for his rights. He's standing up for us. Look, many players don't agree with his decision to not get vaccinated. This is going to continue, I believe, for Novak down the road as other countries start to put these more strict protocols in place just to be allowed to enter the country.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Patrick.